For his analysis of the Prime Minister's speech, let's bring in Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell. He joins me now from Canberra and he was there at the Press Club this afternoon. Andrew, I'm going to get your thoughts on the PM's responses to a couple of specific questions in a moment, but let's start at the top. Did he do today what he needed to do to get him back in the race ahead of the federal campaign?
Some of it, Peter, I believe. He needed to show some contrition for some mistakes he's made in the job in terms of the vaccine rollout and in terms of underestimating what was going to occur in summer with Omicron. So a big tick for that. Obviously, he wants to take it onto jobs and economic management, but he just tripped over the questions, let's face it, and faced a difficult time there. So, and they'll probably dominate to some extent. So it's an uphill battle for Scott Morrison. He's struggling at the moment. And that's despite, as he says, unemployment about to hit the sort of 3% mark. It doesn't seem to matter. Inflation's getting away. People are dying with COVID. Businesses are shut down because people are scared to go out and get sick and they're struggling. And I'm not sure the Prime Minister has his head around the depth of anger that's out there. He's had a crack at it today. People have also said to me he's probably just tired after a couple of years of the pandemic. And I think you can see that in some of his performance. And I'd also say, and I've said this to you before, that Scott Morrison, a bit like Anthony Albanese, can talk a bit too much. It was a very long speech.
Look, I think there's a lot of grunt in the speech, if I can call it that, a lot of detail about policy, a lot of detail about achievements. You're right to point out economic circumstances, well, they haven't been this good for such a long time. You would expect to see that flow through in the polls, flowing through to the polls, but it's not, of course. And that's got to be a concern. But you're right, tonight the news will be all about the responses to questions, not the substance of his remarks. You hit him with a question about the cost of everyday essentials. Here was the Prime Minister's response.
Have you lost touch with ordinary Australians? And on that theme, off the top of your head, can you tell me the price of a loaf of bread, a litre of petrol and a rapid antigen test?
Well, let me talk to you about a couple of things on that point. Now, I'm not going to pretend to you that I go out each day and I buy a loaf of bread and I buy a litre of milk. I'm not going to pretend to you that I do that. And I'll leave those sort of things to you, mate. And you can run it. But the point is, I do my job every day to ensure that those things are as affordable as they possibly can be for Australians every single day.
Now, to be honest, Andrew, that surprised me, that response, because no one expects a PM to buy the bread and the milk. But when I worked for a Prime Minister, our press office always had a list at the top of the boss's briefing folder and ran him through the numbers. RBA cash rate, cost of petrol at the Bowser, how much is a litre of milk, all the things that ordinary people out there, I know they know the price of, you know they know the price of. If he's going to talk about economic management and how people are feeling coming out of the pandemic, it's just sort of bread and butter. So how did he handle it, do you think?
Oh, well, it was a real misstep in my book. I guess you'd expect me to say that, but I was nervous about the question. I thought rats is too easy. Everyone knows they're about $10 each and they're too expensive. Petrol's too easy. You drive past the Bowser all the time, even if he's being chauffeured around. It's around $1.87, $1.90. So I thought the correct answer was, well, we know these things are too high. We're working on it. Labor would do a worse job, sort of thing. Instead, what you saw there in that footage, Peter, he seemed to be shuffling around the desk with the papers. I think he was looking for the list.
Yeah, but he was looking for his piece of paper. Yeah.
You're not the first person who's worked at high levels of government to mention this to me today. So a couple of Howard staffers have told us, for example, that he certainly had a list. Josh Frydenberg, I understand, has a list and the PM has one too. So I think that's a bit of a shocker. But I think it speaks generally. He should know petrol and the price of rapid antigens off by heart, not necessarily bread. Of course, he doesn't shop for himself because they're big issues at the moment. And I just think the PM's lacking a bit of confidence. That poll's really knocked him around. The summer of Omicron has as well. He's got some recovery to do. And I am concerned, to be quite frank with you, Peter, that Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg are a bit out of touch at the moment. They're not seeing what's happening with small business at the moment. And that's something they're really going to have to address. And they've got an opportunity in that March 29 budget.
I think the tough thing over the last couple of years, but particularly last 6 months, see, borders have been closed. Prime ministers have been sitting in their office doing all these Zoom meetings and very important health and medical conferences to get through the pandemic. They've lost that ability, unlike the opposition leader, to get out to the shopping centres, to get out to the shopping strips where there's small business, to have that constant exchange that our political leaders in this country generally do, that keeps their feet on the ground. I think the PM's been in a bit of a bubble. I certainly think the Treasurer as well. I think that's where we might see some sharper campaigning as they start to get out and about. But your question wasn't the only testy one. Channel 10's Peter Van Onselen played, well, I reckon this is a pretty tawdry game, if I'm honest, reading out a series of private text messages. Let's have a listen.
I've been provided with a text message exchange between the former New South Wales Premier and a current Liberal Cabinet Minister. I've got them right here. In one, she describes you as, quote, a horrible, horrible person, going on to say she did not trust you and you're more concerned with politics than people. The Minister is even more scathing, describing you as a fraud and, quote, a complete psycho. Does this exchange surprise you? And what do you think it tells us?
Well, I don't know who you're referring to or the basis of what you've put to me, but I obviously don't agree with it, and I don't think that's my record.
I tell you, journalists wonder why public rate them about as low as real estate agents. I mean, the PM makes a keynote speech today and you get one question PVO and you waste it on that.
But I think the other difficulty there, the wrong thing from a journalistic point of view, Peter, is you've got to name the other party. I mean, it's no good saying a current Liberal Cabinet Minister. Well, who is it? I mean, what does it mean otherwise? And Gladys Berejiklian's put out a statement saying she can't recall the messages. Obviously, that doesn't mean that they're not real. But I thought that was really lacking. If you're going to go with that story, you need to know who the minister is. But I can see your concern about the private nature of it. I do wonder how it's got out there, who's forwarded it and who's leaked it, and what their motivations are.